Ever wondered why so many women never report their abusers? What happens when they do? Number 7. Criminal justice. The long and winding road. Did you know that only about 230 out of every 1,000 sexual assaults get reported to police? The numbers are shocking yet real. When Sarah, a 34-year-old accountant from Denver, finally gathered the courage to report her ex-boyfriend for domestic violence, she had no idea what awaited her. "I thought I'd just tell my story and justice would follow," she recalls, her voice slightly trembling. "Instead, I found myself repeating my trauma over and over to different people who seemed skeptical at every turn." The criminal justice system represents what many consider the most official form of accountability for crimes against women. It's the path we're all told to take. Call the police, file a report, press charges. Yet, for countless women, this journey becomes a secondary trauma. Police investigations can be invasive and insensitive. Prosecutors might decide there's not enough evidence to pursue charges even when victims have photos of bruises or threatening text messages. And if a case does make it to court, women face cross-examination designed to discredit them, questioning everything from their clothing choices to their sexual history. In rural America, these challenges intensify. Denise, from a small town in Kentucky, found that reporting her assault meant everyone in town knew her business within days. "The officer who took my report was my abuser's hunting buddy," she explains. "I withdrew my complaint after receiving death threats from his family members. There was nowhere to hide." Statistics paint a disheartening picture across the board. According to RAINN, Rape, Abuse and Incest National Network, out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, only 46 lead to arrest. Of those, just 9 cases get referred to prosecutors, 5 lead to a felony conviction, and merely 4.6 perpetrators will see jail time. For domestic violence cases, the numbers aren't much better. Even when convictions occur, sentences often fail to reflect the severity of the crime. Some jurisdictions are working to improve. Specialized domestic violence courts have emerged in cities like New York and Chicago, with judges trained specifically in the dynamics of abuse. Trauma-informed policing initiatives train officers to recognize how trauma affects victims' recall and behavior. But these programs remain the exception rather than the rule, leaving most women to navigate a system designed for evidence collection rather than healing. Number 6. Civil courts. Justice with a price tag. Can justice be bought? For many women seeking accountability through civil courts, the answer is troublingly close to yes. When criminal courts fail victims, which happens with disturbing frequency, civil litigation offers an alternative path. The burden of proof is lower preponderance of evidence rather than beyond reasonable doubt, making it somewhat easier to hold perpetrators accountable. Civil courts can award monetary damages for medical expenses, therapy costs, lost wages, and pain and suffering. They can also provide protective orders that criminalize an abuser's attempt to contact their victim. But there's a catch. Several, actually. Civil litigation is expensive, often prohibitively so. Attorney fees can quickly reach tens of thousands of dollars. Rebecca, a nurse from Seattle, spent over $45,000 pursuing a civil case against her former boss, who had sexually harassed her for years. "I won technically," she says, "but after attorney fees I barely broke even, and that doesn't account for the emotional toll of depositions, hearings, and having my personal life dissected." Time presents another barrier. Civil cases can drag on for years, forcing victims to remain tethered to their trauma, while legal proceedings inch forward. Employers might view litigious employees has trouble creating informal blacklisting. For immigrant women, or those with complicated visa situations, the risks multiply further. Then there's the matter of collecting judgments. Winning a case doesn't guarantee payment. Many abusers simply don't have assets to seize, while others find creative ways to hide their money. Some declare bankruptcy or move across state lines to complicate enforcement. Despite these challenges, civil courts have provided meaningful justice for some. High-profile cases against powerful figures and institutions have brought about systemic changes in workplace policies and cultural attitudes. Class action lawsuits have forced organizations to address systemic abuse and harassment. And for some survivors, the validation of having a judge or jury believe their story provides a healing that transcends monetary compensation. Number 5. Campus adjudication. Education's imperfect answer. Did you know campus sexual assault is so common that it's been called an epidemic? 1 in 5 women experiences it during college years. When Jordan started her freshman year at a prestigious university, she never imagined she'd become part of that statistic. After being assaulted by a fellow student at an off-campus party, she learned about Title IX, the federal civil rights law that prohibits sex discrimination in education. This legislation requires schools to address sexual harassment and assault through their own adjudication processes. I chose the campus route because I wasn't ready to go to police, Jordan explains. I just wanted to feel safe in my classes again. He was in 2 of them. Campus systems operate in parallel to criminal courts, with their own procedures, standards, and remedies. They can change class schedules, implement no-contact orders, provide academic accommodations, and in serious cases suspend or expel perpetrators. These measures aim to ensure victims can continue their education free from harassment. But campus justice systems have faced criticism from all sides. Victim advocates argue many schools prioritize their reputations over student safety, pointing to instances where assaults get downplayed or hidden. Meanwhile, due process advocates raise concerns about accused students facing serious consequences without adequate procedural protections. The rules governing these proceedings have become politically charged, changing with each presidential administration. Campus proceedings also highlight troubling inequities. Students at well-resourced private institutions often have access to more comprehensive support services than those at underfunded public colleges. First-generation students may struggle to navigate complex reporting systems without guidance, and students of color face documented disparities in how their cases are handled, both as complainants and respondents. I didn't want him expelled, Jordan reflects. I just wanted acknowledgement of what happened and some boundaries. But the process became so adversarial so quickly. We both ended up with lawyers, which my parents could barely afford. I'm not sure anyone got justice in the end. Number 4. What remedies? Power dynamics at play. How safe do you feel at work? For millions of women, the workplace is where they face some of their most persistent abuses. Workplace sexual harassment remains disturbingly common despite decades of awareness, campaigns, and policy development. According to a 2018 study, 38% of women have experienced sexual harassment at work. The numbers are even higher for women in male-dominated fields, women of color, and LGBTQ+ women. Human resource departments represent the first line of institutional response. They're supposed to investigate complaints, enforce anti-harassment policies, and protect employees from retaliation. Yet many women discover HR's primary loyalty is to the company, not to them. When I reported my manager's behavior, HR asked what I'd done to encourage him, recalls Melissa, a marketing executive. Then they moved me to a different department, while he kept his corner office. For those dissatisfied with internal responses, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, provides another avenue. This federal agency investigates workplace discrimination and harassment, attempting conciliation between parties or sometimes pursuing litigation. However strict time limits apply, in most cases, charges must be filed within 180 days of the incident. Many women miss this window while trying internal remedies first, or simply processing their trauma. Some industries have developed alternative mechanisms. Hollywood created the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund after revelations about Harvey Weinstein and other powerful abusers. Various tech companies have experimented with anonymous reporting systems. Labor unions, where they exist, can sometimes advocate for members facing harassment. But these solutions remain patchwork, leaving many women vulnerable. The most promising developments may be cultural rather than procedural. As more women attain leadership positions, workplace cultures are slowly shifting. Companies increasingly recognize that addressing harassment isn't just legally necessary but economically advantageous. Studies consistently show diverse, respectful workplaces outperform toxic ones. Yet, progress remains uneven, with low-wage workers and those in precarious employment situations particularly vulnerable. I stayed silent for years because I needed that job, explains Elena, who worked as a hotel housekeeper. Single mom, 2 kids, limited English. Where would I go if I lost that income? Eventually, I found a different job with female managers. The difference is night and day. Number 3, restorative justice. Healing outside the system. What if justice looked more like healing than punishment? That's the question. Restorative justice practices attempt to end. Restorative justice approaches center on repairing harm rather than simply punishing offenses. They typically bring together the person who caused harm, those affected by it, and community members in facilitated dialogue. The goal is accountability, healing, and behavioral change rather than punishment alone. For some survivors of gender-based violence, this approach offers what conventional justice cannot, answers genuine apology, and the opportunity to be truly heard. Traditional courts rarely provide space for victims to ask, "Why me?" or tell their full story without interruption. Restorative processes create this space intentionally. Tarana, who experienced intimate partner violence, participated in a community-based restorative process after conventional courts failed her. The restraining order just made him angry, she explains. What I really needed was for him to understand the impact of his actions and commit to change in the restorative circle. I watched something shift in him when other men in his community held him accountable. However, restorative justice remains controversial in gender-based violence cases. Critics worry it might pressure victims into forgiveness or minimize serious crimes. Others point out that without proper safeguards, these processes could give abusers another opportunity to manipulate victims. Most experts agree restorative approaches should never be mandatory and must be victim-centered. The availability of restorative options varies widely by location. Some progressive prosecutors' offices have begun incorporating restorative programs into their work. Indigenous communities have long practiced their own forms of restorative justice, often with particular sensitivity to gender-based harms. Campus settings increasingly offer restorative options alongside more traditional disciplinary procedures. Research remains limited but promising. Studies suggest participants in well-run restorative processes report higher satisfaction than those who go through conventional courts. Recidivism rates appear lower, but implementation matters. Tremendously poorly executed restorative justice can be worse than none at all. Number 2. Digital justice. From hazakes to consequences. Can a tweet bring down a predator? In the digital age, sometimes the answer is yes. When traditional justice systems fail, many women turn to what some call digital justice, using social media and online platforms to name abusers, share experiences, and create accountability through public pressure. The Pound Me Too movement represents the most visible example, but digital justice takes many forms, from private whisper networks warning about dangerous individuals to public callouts naming specific perpetrators. For Aisha, a freelance writer, Twitter became her courtroom after a prominent editor sexually harassed her during a job interview. I had no HR department to report to. He was a gatekeeper in my industry, she explains. After hearing he'd done this to multiple women, I decided to tweet about it within days. 3 publications cut ties with him. Digital justice can be remarkably effective. It bypasses institutional barriers, moves quickly, requires no money, and creates pressure that conventional systems often don't. It has toppled powerful abusers who operated with impunity for decades. It allows patterns to emerge when multiple victims speak out about the same perpetrator. It creates community among survivors who might otherwise feel isolated. But digital accountability comes with serious risks and limitations. False allegations, though rare, can spread with the same velocity as true ones. The court of public opinion lacks due process protections. The consequences can be wildly disproportionate. Some lose careers over minor boundary violations, while others face mild social media criticism for serious assaults. And backlash can be severe, including doxing, threats, and harassment campaigns. Digital justice also reflects existing social inequalities. Allegations from white, attractive, well-connected women tend to gain more traction than those from marginalized groups. The women most vulnerable to abuse, those with disabilities, undocumented immigrants, trans women, often have the least social capital to leverage online. As this form of accountability evolves, communities are developing more nuanced approaches. Some create graduated response protocols, reserving public callouts for cases where private intervention has failed. Others focus on pattern identification rather than individual sannation, and increasingly, digital callouts are seen as one tool among many rather than a complete justice solution. Number 1. Community alginate, the oldest form of justice. Did you know that before there were courts or police, communities protected their own? This ancient approach is finding new relevance today. Community accountability describes processes where social groups, friends, neighbors, religious communities, activist circles take responsibility for addressing harm within their midst without relying on state systems. These approaches recognize that many women, particularly those from marginalized communities, have valid reasons to distrust police and courts based on historical and ongoing injustices. As an undocumented woman, calling police wasn't an option, explains Lucia, who faced domestic violence from her partner. But my church community stepped in. The pastor and several respected elders confronted my husband. They found him temporary housing, connected him with a batterer intervention program, and checked on me daily. When he completed the program and demonstrated change, community accountability takes diverse forms. Sometimes it involves direct intervention with community members confronting abusers and establishing consequences like temporary or permanent exclusion from spaces. Other approaches focus on victim support, providing financial assistance, childcare, housing, or emotional support that enables survivors to leave dangerous situations. Many communities develop prevention strategies like bystander intervention training or educational workshops about healthy relationships. These approaches offer certain advantages. They can be culturally specific, addressing harm in ways that respect community values. They often focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment alone, and they recognize that many situations involve complex relationships that will continue in some form even after abuse is addressed. However, community accountability has limitations. Some communities lack the resources, knowledge, or will to effectively address violence. Power dynamics within communities can protect popular or powerful abusers. And without formal authority, enforcement of boundaries depends entirely on social pressure. Most troublingly, some religious or cultural communities have histories of minimizing gender-based violence or blaming victims. The most promising models combine community accountability with access to professional resources. One entity approach involves community-based organizations that partner with domestic violence experts, creating culturally responsive intervention teams. These hybrid models honor community autonomy while providing specialized knowledge about trauma and abuse dynamics. What happens when all these systems fail? When criminal courts dismiss cases, civil litigation proves too expensive. Workplaces protect abusers, and communities lack the capacity to intervene. This reality, the absence of accessible justice, remains the most common experience for victimized women worldwide. Are we ready to confront this uncomfortable truth and build something better?